What are we going to do about it, Medeawans? What are we going to do about it? Not one person stood up and said anything. I know I didn't. I was watching. Then an older lady steps up at that particular moment in her early 60s, and her name was Josephine Mendowman. If you're doing papers, you can look that up, Josephine Mendowman from Canada. She stood up and she looked at him and walked towards him and said, "Grandfather, I'll stand up for the water." So when I see these kinds of turnouts, I'm very glad for it. Because only one person stepped up in the Medeawan Lodge for water, and that was our grandmother, Josephine. She stood up and she said, "I will stand up for the water." And he said, "Good. What are you going to do?" She said, "I don't know, but I'm going to pray about it." So, a few months later, she picks up a pail of copper. We believe that water itself, the chemistry of water and water itself, descends from the stars. What does your science tell you? Those of you in chemistry and biology, where does water come from? The chemistry of it comes from the stars. This earth itself, herself, was moving through and in its responsibilities around the sun, and water came later. Water came later from space. This is the very same history that we're taught within our lives. The very same history that the woman carries and said, "I'll stand up for the water." And so while she was in Thunder Bay, Ontario, this is where she lives. She took up a pail of water, joined one of her friends, and she said, "I'm going to stand up for the water." She went to the water, sang one of our water songs. We have several water songs that are just for our society. She sang those songs and she fed the water a plate of food. People watching that from dominant culture would think this person's lost her mind. She's worshiping water. She's polluting the water. Look, she's putting food in it. What's that all about? Yeah, this is something that we do. Normally, before you're even supposed to go in the milk pond, you guys, you're supposed to put tobacco out for the water. How come? Because you don't know what's going to happen in there. You talk to your uncles. Talk to your dad. You go swimming with water moccasins, man, you better say something before you jump in. Because, you want them to be friendly. So she puts her tobacco in, she puts her food in, she sings her songs, and then she, with her friend, walks around this body of water, singing water songs. And then a vision comes to her through our Medeawan Lodge, and in that lodge, she said, "I saw women from all over carrying a bucket of water, copper, containing the water of the place that we're going to walk around." And I see an eagle staff, much like this one, water clan colors. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk around that and we're going to sing to her, meaning the water itself. So that was our first try. Second try, a little bit larger of a lake. Third try, Mississippi River. Done it 3 times. And after that, I believe it's 3 times around the Great Lakes. And from that, water walks were born that are happening all over the world where people are bringing attention to water. Why is that? Because your generation, your culture, our cultures together are facing the very same moment that my ancestors faced when it came to the land. It's the privatization and commodification of water. When you stand on the shores of Lake Michigan with your friend, do you think, who owns this? Those thoughts were things that you never had as kids. When you see the fluidity of water moving through the earth, when you're standing there with your friends looking at the water and you're a kid, mostly what you're thinking about is, I want to jump in there and swim. Now you don't think that. Now you think about what's inside that water before I go swimming. Used to be that we thought water is a thing that could make us healthy. Anybody here at Flint, Michigan? Flint, Michigan. Anybody here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin? Milwaukee, Wisconsin, over 15 years ago, the entire population of the metro area was getting sick, and people were wondering, what is going on? So what did the Milwaukee Health Department say? Drink water. Drink water. Flush your system out. Drink water. Water is good for you. Stay away. We'll figure out what's being passed from one person to another person to another person. Those of you who know this story knows what happened. What happened? It was the water herself making the people sick, killing people in county hospital, killing babies. The county made settlements with those families and older people in those units. At county hospitals, elder units, and one family to another. I know this because I was stationed in Hawaii at the time. And I got calls from my family and my kids, my daughter, my sons. It was the water herself that was supposed to help them, was making them sicker and killing people. This idea of when you stand and you look across and see water, now we're in a generation where we're beginning to have these thoughts about who owns the water. Nestle Company, anybody like Nestle chocolate? That kind of thing? They got a CEO there that says water is not a human right. It's not mentioned in the Constitution, is it? Anybody know Bill of Rights? Got water in there? Constitution? Anybody see water in there? I haven't. But when Native people will see it, it begins with pursuit of life. That we have that right. If you accept this precept, if you do, water is life. Have you ever heard that said? Water is life. If you accept that water is life, then water is fundamental right to humanity. I would say, and I have done this, that I would like to debate with science and spirituality and other pieces. Any person, from the mining company to Nestle's, all they have to do is go without water for 5 days. No fluids, no liquids, no water, just 5 days, man. We can have that conversation. And I'll be there for you. Let's have it. For 1,000, however you want to do, we'll broadcast it. Satellite, man, we'll do it. We'll do it right here, University of Green Bay. We'll have the University Phoenix guy who runs around at basketball games here. He can be the moderator. Right? Love that guy. We'll have him moderate. 5 days without fluid or water. Who's going to debate me after 5 days with no fluid or water? How long does human life last without water? 3.5 days. 4 on the outside. I'm not going to have anybody debating me. I can't survive that long without it. It's something that we take for granted. And it's under attack. And it's during your time. The fundamental question that my ancestors asked ourselves when people looked at the land and began dividing up and saying this belongs to you and that belongs to you. Now companies are coming in saying the very same thing about water. And it's on your watch. So what are we going to do about it? That particular piece is my part of this conversation when we do these programs. The other piece that we do, which is science, and what we can do directly about it, are beginning to be very simple now. Instead of fighting this fight on the state level, it's now becoming a thing on the local level. So if you're wondering, I wonder what I can do, is to join those counties in those areas, either through your work or through phone calls with politicians, standing up and being counted. I got a son named Sawyer Denny who said that that's stupidity. My son Sawyer graduated from University of Wisconsin-Madison. He was on his way to go to Princeton, master's program. Then he decided to go join the water fight. Right now he's on the legal defense team for no doubt 3.5 years of court cases for those people who gathered in North Dakota against the pipeline, and all those people who were arrested and charged, they're all in all those cases are in Mandan, North Dakota. He's on the legal defense team. I've seen all the cases. And his thing is, Dad, you're kind of old. You're kind of past it. The advice you give people is just, frankly, full of beans. He said what people have to do is stand down. What people have to do is quit posting online, erase their electronic footprint on this issue, stop calling their legislatures on this kind of issue, and go underground and work as real revolutionaries outside of electronic footprints. You say, well, why do you say that? I'm going to colleges. Why do you say that? Because everybody on my team always says for you guys to stand up. How can I sit there and do this? So how could I say that? He said, because every time we bring cases up in front of the court, a lot of times they'll bring up Facebook posts. Anybody got any Facebook posts or YouTube pieces of them? Maybe they wouldn't want the world to see. Maybe there was something unfortunate in your past and you get rid of electronic signatures. Somehow those signatures come up. Maybe you're on Snapchat. Maybe you guys are playing video games where those new conversations are being held. He's saying, go to those areas because you can't be tracked as well. He's not seen that yet. So it's an interesting time that we're living in. The older population that stands before you, like myself, is saying stand up and be counted. And the younger, more revolutionary voices are out there saying why? Because when you do that, all they do is represent that and say, this is what made you into a rioter. This is what made you into a person who won't obey the law. You've been converted to rebellion. It's an interesting time that we're living in. And we're all living in it. Not just in this space, but in cyberspace and in courtrooms. And that time is coming. And it's already actually here. But to understand the issue is to understand the origin of something. No matter if you do papers, no matter if you do social research or you're looking at engineering, always go to the core, go to the origin. A lot of people like to start right with where the disagreements are. Go to the origin. Go to their origin. It'll help you understand things, and it'll take you away from the language of shame and blame. Well, you did this, and this makes you a bad person. You did that, and to me, that makes me stand against you. Instead of saying, maybe we can stand together if we get these things together and understand them correctly. It is an interesting time, certainly, this piece that's happening on the pipeline. What's going to happen is at this particular moment when people ask, the Menominee tribe has sued in federal court because the waterway where this mine is going to be is a waterway that shares a border with Wisconsin. And that's interesting. You know, Aaron Rodgers, even with his broken collarbone, could throw a football across that river. Just kind of run up and do it. But as Menominee people would think about that river, imagine a time when that river was, Menominee River is the #1 place of sturgeon births. And that go on into then swim back on into the Great Lakes. The #1 place. It's a very important place for fishing. But imagine a time when that river was so full, and some of you have been there, so filled with sturgeon, my clan people, that you could actually, and people would write this, and explorers when they first came, could actually, it felt like they could walk across the backs of the fish. Man, we get excited when we see 3 of them. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, this is really awesome. Can you imagine a river the size of Menominee so filled with those fish that you could walk across them? We have to look at history and see the things that we have done. As Native people, we have stories about those sturgeon. We have stories about birds. Man, if you don't feel like going out there and getting revolutionary and standing up and holding signs and hosing down whatever. Put up a bird feeder, man. That is one way to do it. Ask your moms and dads about this. The world that we're living in is very different. The world I was born in just a few years ago, corn actually grew in corn rows. Now you tell an African American child about corn rows, they don't even know what corn rows are in Milwaukee, what they look like, because corn doesn't grow in rows anymore. Has anybody gone down the freeway and see corn growing in rows? Used to be that was the only thing. Now they're growing right up on top of each other. GMO corn. Used to be when you go out on the road, it'd be called a windshield test. You go down a country road and your windshield would become so heavy and thick with insects that your windshield were passing through their areas, and those little bodies were hitting that windshield was hitting them. And sometimes you couldn't even keep up with your windshield wipers. Now, hardly a one. I'm telling you, when I came up from Milwaukee, coming here in the beginning, and my youth, when I first went to Milwaukee, I could see birds across the bridges lined up one on top of another, and wires upon wires of birds. And now, I hardly see them. We're changing our world. What are we going to do about it? And the question that was in front of my ancestors is the same question that's in front of you. And those little things are fought from one neighborhood to another. Right now, and this is where I'm going to kind of conclude my talk and go to some questions. In Michigan, a group of townspeople are suing a major corporation because the corporation signed an agreement to extract so many thousands of gallons of water from their community wells. The community is saying that belongs to us as a community, and the proprietor of the extraction business, who's in the business of extracting water, is saying that water is ours, and it's in a Michigan state court right now. And as those decisions are being made, those decisions are going to happen here in Wisconsin for little townships too. Just like if Aquila Resource sets up shop on that Menominee River, there are several mining areas where papers have already been pulled so Aquila Resources can start getting into the mining business in the state of Wisconsin. Right, in the northern third of Wisconsin. They got the papers, they got the paperwork all set up. Once the governor goes with their signature, if there's no municipal rules around it, they're going to get grandfathered right in. And those of you who are from those communities, you know exactly what communities those are. We have maps of those in our presentation, which unfortunately I don't have right now. So those precedents set in Michigan and other towns around the United States are going to be precedents that are going to be used right here in the state of Wisconsin. We're in the middle of a water war, you guys. I hope you know it. And the results of it are going to affect your children. My last piece, and that was my last piece of information, this is kind of a commentary. The last time I was in the Medewan Lodge with Josephine McDowell, now calls me her grandson, and she said something interesting with a group of our grandmothers to me directly. And they said the time of the seventh generation within that prophecy and the origin of that prophecy, that is winding up right now. And those of you in this room are a part of that seventh generation. They talked about, Mark, there's an eighth generation that's coming, and those children were born 2 summers ago. That's the beginning of the eighth generation, and it's that generation that's going to inherit a world that in its path and it's making its way through this world is going to come to a fork. And within this prophecy that was shared is that there's going to be one pathway going one way, one pathway going the other way. And within that eighth generation prophecy, they said that it would be indigenous people that would hold information to inform humanity as to which choice and which road humanity was going to go down. That's an interesting thing to me. And I wasn't especially charged with that one. They just said, when you do your public talks, start talking about that. Because this seventh generation that is everybody has a responsibility to get this new generation that's coming up as best as they can with language and tribal information and your tribal information as much as possible, because that's going to inform our upcoming choices. It's an interesting time to live in. So with that, I'll just kind of stop there. I've been going on for about an hour. Apologize. And open this up for questions or comments. I'll end it then this way for all of us. Oh, yes, sorry.
So, right now, a lot of counties, Brown County included, have opposed the Blackwater line. What does that mean?
So what she mentioned was there's several counties in the state of Wisconsin that have passed resolutions that they stand against the mine being put on the Michigan side, this 400-acre site. And she said, what does that mean? What that means is it gives more standing to the suit. Practically, it gives more standing to the suit that this is an interstate boundary and that people are fed by waters from Great Lakes area, underground tributaries and so forth, and all of these things, waterways are connected, and that they could be affected. So what happens is essentially all of these non-binding resolutions that have been made by supportive counties not wanting to see mining coming in announces the position of humanity and what's called a social contract that the mine not go in. And this is a part of legalese that a lot of people are having difficulties wrapping their head around, but it's pretty significant. A social contract means that when a company sets up and operates business in a community, that community is okay with it. Brown County, all the other counties that are affected by those waterways and could be polluted, and basically even if they're not within the watershed, and they are in the watershed, but even if they weren't, they're standing up as people saying this kind of behavior isn't right. And we as human communities stand up and say, we don't want this kind of operation in our community, and we don't even want it for other communities. That's how fundamental this is, the rights of water. So it's very important, vitally important, this social contract, because this is the last line of defense against the mines. That is the very last line of defense. When it's a house-to-house, person-to-person that stands up, just like what happened at North Apple. They stand up and say, we can't do this to our world. If you want to know where this happens, and if you're doing papers on this stuff, just kind of talk to people that did service in Alaska, Army, Navy, Air Force people. They can tell you about flying in planes and flying over entire reaches and stretches of dead zones where this kind of mine happens with impunity. They will tell you first person, or you'll see their accounts, or you'll see their pictures when they do their flyovers over these kinds of mines. It's hard to say the least. But the social contract is the last line of defense, meaning society itself stands up to a corporation. Because remember, corporations are people, they have rights. Where one group of people stands up to a corporation that's a person, and says, we don't want you here. The cost for your operation is going to be too much. And what happens then is that every moment where a mine could possibly be put in, every touch point that the mine tries to be put in, people stand in the way. And it becomes too much money for that mine and too much trouble for the mine to go in. Because remember, Aquila Resources, they're not going to be owning this mine. Once they get the permits go out to the highest bidder. Then the highest bidder is the one who's going to do the mining, and how mining operations work in general is a corporation is established, you go in, you mine the area you want to mine, and then that corporation shuts down. Okay? And then if there's runoff, which there always is, and waterways are polluted, which there always is, the people left on the hangar to step up and clean up the area, if they even can clean it up, is you as the taxpayers. Because then the corporations go back to saying, well, that's a common waterway, we just use the water for a little bit. But yet that water is polluted, and remember that water that was mined like that, in areas where mines like this went in, they go back to Roman times and they're still polluting. Who owns the water then? The corporation that's put to task and supposed to clean it up, they're out of business. They bust them up and then they move on, reconstitute themselves. Yes?
So when these new corporations come in for mines, before they go under, are they supposed to be liable for cleaning up?
They are supposed to be liable for cleaning up. Again, and now this is going to have to depend on the municipalities. So for example, Aquila Resources in its application for the mine says that they'll be responsible for cleaning up for some number of years, and I forget what it is, maybe 10 or 9, whatever that may be. And then after that, then they don't have to worry about cleaning it up anymore. On the Michigan side? On the Michigan side. So if that pollution runoff hits Wisconsin, they're not liable for that from day one. So the question that I got at Whitewater, EW Whitewater, when we did a talk, was a good one. And that question was, why is it that people would want to mine? So I talked to my own representative in Waukesha. Craig is his last name. He's a co-signer of the mining bill that undid the previous mining bill. And he's very kind of to the point and polite. I asked him 3 questions. 1, public hearings, and when the people of Wisconsin showed up and weighed in, what were the responses of yeses in support of reestablishing mining in Wisconsin? And how many no's to saying we want the law to stay as it is? What's that count? And he said, I don't know the count. And he's the one that ran the hearings. Where can I find it? Well, you can find it in the public record. And he gave me a place where I could go to find it. I said, well, does that matter to you? And he said, well, sure, the public should always weigh in on what they're thinking, but those are usually people who are really engaged. He said, what I represent here in Waukesha, the safe confines of Waukesha, 2 hours away from here, is the silent majority of American people and Wisconsinites that want to see jobs. And he pointed, and he was very nice. He said, well, look at Lac de Flambeau. Look how many jobs that were put in there because of that mine. And I said, you mean when the mine went in, and the jobs actually went down while the mine was operating, and then those employment numbers are even more depressed after it's closed, and the people that were employed are left on the government dole? That mine? And he said, well, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but he gave us jobs, can't fight that. And then the last thing he said kind of got me, and that was the end of the conversation. I said, thank you. I said, what makes you think that this is all right? He said, well, 1, there's a silent majority of Wisconsinites that are not being heard of, but when I have conversations with them, they're on that side. And he also said, hey, there's businesses that want to do business with Wisconsin, and I want to be that guy that helps them out. I don't want to be a person that tells a business no when they want to come into Wisconsin. We've been lagging long enough, and if a corporation wants to tell me they're going to help us out with jobs, I'm going to help them. That was our conversation. And that's why people want these mines, I guess. I don't get it. Maybe you get it. But But I would encourage you to, as you depart and go about your responsibilities, good luck on finals, by the way. Take a look at the videos that are about this mine and the presentations from Dr. Al Geddes. He'll get, for those of you who are in biology and environmental sciences, he breaks it down for you in really great and understandable ways, points to other studies, so you can understand the science of what I'm talking about. Because even me, who's been on this talk tour for a while, I look at it and I'm just astounded. My particular responsibility is to deliver a cultural component, and for the Menominee women that are here, it's been amazing. Because I saw some young girls younger than you, like way younger, and they actually, one of the animals that came up from the river and became human was a beaver, right? They actually wrote a song about that and called on that piece of creation to help them to fight the mine and the pollution of the waters. Man, this is a cool song. I was like all crying and everything. Because I'm a dad, you know, I gotta cry. So that's it for me. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them down here. So I'll tell you what, guys, call your moms, call your dads, tell them you love them, check in with them, tell them how many A's you're gonna get. They love to hear it, whether you get them or not. And, you know, be kind to your brothers and sisters. And if you get involved in this fight, that'd be awesome for you to stand up and be counted. And if there's another way you want to get involved, it's looking like things are gonna start getting touchy, think about getting offline. Come to some of our meetings.
All right, so like I said before, there's some papers up here. If you look at these stuff, there's contact sheets for the legislators, for our legislators, and for senators that represent us in Wisconsin, and then formats for how you can write a letter or what a script for what to say if you want to call them, whatever you want to do. If you want to take that route. Otherwise, we could make it offline, whatever it is. But thank you.
You don't have to share that with your parents, okay? Just kidding. But thank you, guys. Like she said, if you didn't have a chance to hear, if you want to get involved, there's ways to do it. List of legislators, people to call. Governor's office still taking phone calls. Definitely call Governor State of Wisconsin. As far as I know, he hasn't signed it yet. May within, but at least you can get in that count, which is publicly recorded. It counts. It just apparently we have to go take them out ourselves because they're not going to tell us. So once again, thanks for coming here, making this part of your night, right? Any other announcements?
No, that's
Okay,
thank you.
awesome.